So as for Nativity, I'd give it a 4 out of 10, and as for Mr. Poppy, I sentence him to 3 years in prison. Okay, I think you get the idea. Here's the intro. So Desmond Poppy successfully served his 3 years, and right after his release he made another Nativity film, and once again I'm going to talk about it. But this time I'm an adult, which makes things 10 times worse for me continuing this Christmas special, and with about 4 more times the amount of people watching. But anyway, Nativity 2, Danger in the Manger. Growing up, this was my favourite of the Nativity films. I couldn't really give you a reason why, except this was the only Nativity film I saw in cinemas, and because I was a kid. And kids are mostly brain dead when it comes to film opinions. Like my review on the first Nativity 2 years ago. Wow, time flies. I'll be going through the film scene by scene, talking about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and the outlandish stuff. A lot of people have been waiting patiently for this video, so without further ado, I won't waste any more time. And once again, sorry to any American viewers. And like and subscribe. The movie begins by introducing us to Donald Peterson, played by David Tennant. No Martin Freeman this time. Maybe he was sick of Mr. Poppy and couldn't work with him any longer. And what a stroke of luck that is, because I love David Tennant. I loved him in Doctor Who, I loved him in the Postman Pat movie, and here it's no exception. Every scene he's in, it feels like he's given it his all, which leads to some genuine emotional moments, as well as genuine funny moments later on. But anyway, he and his wife are expecting a baby, and we learn that Donald has a new job as a teacher. All the while, his family life with his father and twin brother Roderick is a bit dysfunctional. But apart from that, very wholesome introduction to a film. I wonder what school he'll be working at. Oh God! We let him out for literally 2 minutes, and he's already committing war crimes, such as the ill treatment of soldiers, I mean children, and the use of biological weapons at a teacher. Will anyone ever stop him? And then immediately after, we learn about a competition held in a castle in Wales called A Song for Christmas. And obviously, Mr. Poppy and the children are going to want to do this competition. So much so that they hold auditions. And this is the sign that this film isn't going to be as good as the first, because the songs are a bit worse. I'll give the first movie this. The songs ranged from listenable to okay. Here, they range from listenable to irritating, but thankfully, most of the irritating stuff is in this section, so I'm not complaining too much. My standards are quite low at this point. But you know who else is signing up for this competition? Gordon and Oakmore. Yep, he's back. And I couldn't be happier, because he's only one of 2 people who have enough anime power to stop Mr. Poppy's war crimes. The second being Mrs. Bevan, who puts a halt to A Song for Christmas and sends the children and Miss Poppy to see Father Christmas instead. Outstanding move. Obviously Mr. Poppy isn't happy with this, since he doesn't have the opportunity to sing in A Song for Christmas and expand his influence. So he tries to negotiate with Mrs. Bevan, but is unsuccessful, since Mrs. Bevan hits him with the fact that he can barely read and write.
You're not even a qualified teacher. You can barely read and write!
Once again, outstanding move. But Poppy being Poppy, he just slams the door and takes the children. Are you done? Anyway, Poppy takes the children to see Father Christmas, and just as they leave the school, they run into Mr. Peterson, who is just about to start his first day. And what does he get introduced to first?
Is that considered a hate crime?
But if you don't think that's a hate crime, Desmond and the children rush Mr. Peterson, and it's Mrs. Bevan who has to break it up. Thank God she was there, or Donald would have ended up being thrown back to Scotland by Mr. Poppy himself. However, whilst Poppy and the kids are there, they ask Father Christmas if they can go to A Song for Christmas, after running into Oakmore and Gordon, who calls a group of children poor and thick. So in retaliation, Mr. Poppy assaults Gordon, Okay, the panic meter has just been moved up with this action. And when Poppy and the children return, they have an actual introduction between Mr. Peterson and his new class. Also, can I just say, how are all these kids in the same classroom? At least with the first Nativity film, the group of children who we get to know. Sounds a bit wrong now. At least they looked like an average primary school class. Here, there are some children who look 5, and some who look 12. And to some of you watching this who say I'm nitpicking, all I have to say is, shush. But as soon as Mr. Peterson asks the class what they're learning, and one of the children just blurts out a song for Christmas.
Yeah, we'll be doing songwriting for Song for Christmas and...
What song for Christmas?
Nice job, lad. So with the cat out of the bag to Mr. Peterson, Desmond and the children try to convince him that they should do the competition. But he's pretty firm on saying no, even though he does want the best interest for the kids by letting them perform the song they've written for at the competition. And all I can really say is that it could do with a little work. Also, can the children just leave their classes whenever the movie needs them to? Ofsted, get on this, give them an inadequate rating. And if that doesn't give an inadequate rating, then this cupboard definitely should give off some signs that Miss Poppy shouldn't be around anyone, let alone a group of school children. As the reason Martin Freeman isn't in this movie is because during the casting process, he purposely did a castaway so that no one could force him back into this movie to work with Mr. Poppy. I definitely didn't influence Martin's decision making. So with Mr. Peterson thankfully diffusing the negativity with Desmond, he can finally start his new job as a teacher. Life is beautiful. What can Mr. Poppy do now? Influence the kids to bring a bunch of babies to school to cast as the baby Jesus in their performance for A Song for Christmas? I wish foreshadowing didn't exist. How is this even possible? How did every kid persuade their parents or a member of their family to bring a literal baby to school? And it was all because of this man and his own personal gain. As you can expect, Donald's had enough and feels as happy as this guy right now. So after a long day, he goes home and rants about Mr. Poppy to his pregnant wife. And can I just say how spot on his impression is of Mr. Poppy? And how hilarious he sounds.
Eddie, no you haven't. Yes I have. You never told me. Yes I did. You promised to the children. I never promised anything to the children. You're just insane.
Even though this film is definitely more outlandish than the first, at least it made me laugh a few times. But then, the comedic tone is ruined by the introduction of Donald's father, who looks like a B-Tech version of Vernon Dudley. Just needed to get that out of my head before he starts ranting at his son about how his brother is doing a lot better than him. This is hitting too close to home for me. But forget the jokes. Donald's father talking about how he thought Donald was going to be the one to take on the Peterson mantle, but turns out it would be Roderick, is actually a very emotional scene about wanting love and appreciation from your parents. Donald really has tried to build himself a new chapter in his life, but his father not recognising that really hurts him. And you can see that in David's performance. It's very subtle and raw how he reacts, compared to the last film where most of the emotional moments feel forced. Here, most of the emotional moments stick the landing and feel earned. So props to that. We also learn that Roderick, Donald's twin brother, is a world-renowned conductor and is going to be performing in A Song for Christmas, which pretty much confirms to us that Donald is not going to Wales. But unfortunately for Donald, he doesn't get the final say, as Mr. Poppy manages to get a hold of a floating bus in order to drive to the competition, as well as abducting half the class and Donald. If there is one person out there who still doesn't believe me that he's committing war crimes, then this is irrefutable evidence. You all laughed at me, but no one's laughing now. Even Mrs. Bevan isn't laughing, who gets fooled by the children that they have full attendance. So now we've learned that no one can stop Mr. Poppy and his Michael Jackson antics, which is why he is now the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I'm not feeling too good. I've never sacrificed so much of my sanity making a video before. Anyway, Gordon and Oakmore are also on their way to the competition. Nothing really of importance here. I just wanted to mention that because after they admire St. Bernadette's cool bus, it cuts to Mr. Peterson tied up in scarves. Brilliant. You should easily be able to escape from that situation. However, my theory is Mr. Poppy put a spell on him so that he wouldn't escape. Who knows what else he has in his chamber? Oh look, it's theft, as he gets one of the kids to rob Mr. Peterson's entire wallet. Just kill him! Somebody kill him! Too much? Well, what is too much is, within the next 3 minutes of runtime, Mrs. Bevan realises that the teachers and some of the students aren't present in the classroom.
Where's Mr. Peterson?
Meanwhile, Gordon and one of the students, which so happens to be his real-life son, sabotage St. Bernadette's by changing the sign to the castle in the opposite direction, whilst the students are on a bathroom break. And during this ordeal, they accidentally leave one of the students behind. Gordon, what have you done? Now she has to feel the wrath of Desmond's war crimes. I'm just going to leave this image on your screen, because I want you to get an idea of how much I'm suffering. But yeah, the girl explains how Gordon abandoned her and proceeds to call Mr. Poppy ugly.
Do you think I'm ugly?
Yes.
You are brave,
Very
my
nice.
friend. This leads Mr. Poppy to believe that she is fulfilling her destiny of following in his war criminal footsteps and lets her on the bus, driving off in the wrong direction. And at this point, you probably think all hell's gonna break loose, since Poppy, Donald and the kids were all going off in the wrong direction. Well, you're not far off, because it's at this moment when we realise there is a stowaway at the back of a bus, that being a baby. Whose baby is it? Who knows? Do we realise whose baby it is? Eventually, but when that does happen, that's not really the focus of the scene, and I'll explain why later. But in the meantime, Poppy now has 14 little minions who are going to steal the moon! I mean, a song for Christmas competition! Yay! But this moment does give us this funny exchange between Desmond and Donald.
Oh, this is the best Christmas ever.
You're right, Mr. Peterson. It is the best Christmas ever. I was being sarcastic.
This, and David Tennant's hilarious expressions, are what keeps my enjoyment of this film very high, which I've got to commend. And I'll keep commending it when Desmond drives the bus into a lake, as the screaming faces on these guys are eye-watering to me. Like, what if I just stressed the images of their faces so that they would take up the whole screen? But why are they screaming? Well, it's because they drove into a lake and unfortunately drowned. Is what I would say if there weren't children on board. But instead, the bus floats, and now they're the boat. I was thinking two things here. The first is that this was probably the only good investment Mr. Poppy ever made, which isn't like him. And the second is that all of this footage I'm showing you was probably only included so that the movie could have a good trailer. Which is why the segment is only 30 seconds long and is cut short because the bus breaks down because Mr. Poppy didn't fill it up with petrol. Okay, that seems like something Mr. Poppy would do. But now the class is stranded in the middle of nowhere. They could be in great danger and not even realise it. Are they on an island with treacherous tribes? Are they even in Wales right now? Are they in Birmingham? Please God, not Birmingham. I may have a distaste for Mr. Poppy, but I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. As well as a boring montage which has a child rolling down a hill, Mr. Poppy bench pressing Mr. Peterson like it's day 125 of the spring milk, and the theft of a donkey that can't even speak English.
Do you know the way?
Come down to Nevic Hospitality or come out my house.
Oh crap, they are in Birmingham! So we cut back to Gordon and Oakmore, who've made it to the venue, and it is only then that they realise one of their classmates is missing. The Nativity cinematic universe must have the worst teachers out of any universe, as well as the most over-the-top villain reveal. I was actually surprised going back and realising that this is the first time that Donald's twin brother Roderick was introduced in person, and that's what makes it unironically good. With this over-the-top introduction and quick retraction back to reality, it gives us a great perception of how others see Roderick compared to how he actually is, just another human being. And this symbolism can further be seen with the introduction of Angel Matthews, who's the competition's host. Here White and Roderick's Black clash, because even though they seem to get along, Roderick appears to be humble, whilst Angel is boastful and stuck up. There, that's two things that actually improve the quality of this film. Does that prove just a little bit that I know what I'm talking about? Anyway, we cut back to the primary school, where Miss Bevan is getting shouted at by Donald's wife and his dad. Or is he the Mr. Peterson? I don't know. At this point in the movie, we're cutting between three places every minute, and it's quite hard to follow. But all you gotta know is that Mrs. Bevan is rallying up all the parents of the lost children to face Mr. Poppy in a clan war. Clan versus clan war. Didn't I already make that joke? Also, shouldn't there be more worried parents than this? Like, why is there only 6 of them? Did some parents just never show up? Very relatable. But anyway, cut back again to the class, and the found boats. And to some of you hardcore fans of this film, yes, I am missing out on a scene. But that's because I'm not comfortable with having it on my channel. But there is this brilliantly aged line when a student asks Donald what gender his baby is going to be.
What are you having, a boy or a girl?
We don't know yet.
It could be an in-betweenie.
Oh my god! David Tennant wasn't the Time Lord. It was Mr. Poppy all this time. But yeah, the class finds 2 boats, 2 teachers, 14 students, and a stowaway. Can anyone give me an answer for what this will result in? Martin? What is danger? You, my friend, are spot on. Another montage then ensues of Poppy, Donald, and the kids in rafts floating down a river with this annoying Christmas music that's played like 4 times in the movie already. Just make it stop. I want to be free of this pain. But then, a die-hard level action scene occurs. Donald falls into the water. I say falls, but in this shot, he just falls forward into the camera and is then magically in the water. Great continuity, Debbie. So Mr. Poppy, being the villain, hero, saves Donald, who repays him by ranting about how he nearly drowned. In Donald's defense, look at these scenes, the water rushing around him. It's terrifying. This is definitely Nativity too. However, you may be wondering how the donkey was able to get on one of the boats. Well, it didn't. because the donkey all of a sudden appears where they stopped, according to Mr. Poppy. But the reality is a bit underwhelming.
We could have walked. Come on.
See that? That's funny. So yeah, the class seek refuge in a cave, but there's one moment that I think stands out here, and it's when Donald is talking to one of the kids who's afraid to go in the cave. Very kindly, he gets down to the child's level and tells him everything will be okay. And this isn't the only scene, this happens numerous times, and it shows how Mr. Peterson cares about his class and his job, allowing us to connect closer to him, which I believe Mr. Madden's lacked in the first film. So in the cave, Donald and Poppy seem to bond for the first time, over experiences with their dads, with Donald talking about how tough his dad was, and Poppy not even having one.
Too many jokes.
One key thing about scenes like this is that they don't have annoying emotional music in the background. All there is simple dialogue and minimal editing in order to make what Donald and Poppy are saying sound effective as possible. But then Poppy ruins it by telling Donald he had a phone this entire time. Are you actually serious? The whole time? I swear, if any of you watching this downplay what I'm saying, just imagine being stranded on a desert island with someone, and like 2 weeks into being stranded, they simply say they had a way of getting off the island the entire time. You'd be mad too. So intended desertion adds another point onto the war crimes Mr. Poppy has committed. So whilst Donald leaves the cave and tries to get signal with the phone, Poppy sings about not having a dad. And the only other child that sings with him, because they also don't have a dad, just so happens to be the only black kid. Shout out to my friend Stephen for pointing this out to me. Stephen, I know you're watching this, so I'll pin your comment. Just don't say anything offensive like Mr. Poppy did nothing wrong. Anyone else out there better not write the same thing. Anyway, Oakmore are beginning to practice in their dressing room until Roderick kicks them out. And to emphasise how much of a villain he is, listen to the music that plays when he enters the room.
Christmas.
Christ, he's threatening, but he's not that threatening.
Hold that breath.
Then both Roderick's choir and Oakmore's do their rehearsals for the show. And honestly, they could do with some work. But in Oakmore's defence, there's this solo this lad does that is actually pretty decent.
Cause I need to get that Fortnite battle pass.
So decent in fact that Roderick and Angel have a plan for it. Now that's what I call foreshadowing. But anyway, not much really happens when we cut back to St. Bernadette's, except that the children are getting tired, Mr. Poppy and Mr. Peterson have a fallen out, and the baby is briefly lost. And when I say briefly, I mean like 30 seconds. But the emotional moments are still worthwhile, such as the scene where Donald tells the little girl about his half-lock that him and his twin brother have, and his family life not being perfect. I don't think anyone's family lives out there are perfect. So for one brief fleeting moment, we're able to simply connect with a man's struggles with life in a children's Christmas film. But that's not what caught my mind during the scene, because look at this moment here. Enhance. Mr. Poppy is able to be hurt. Amazon Prime's The Boys would later take this narrative technique and use it for the Homelander Soldier Boy fight. Hang on, I'm getting a bit distracted. Where was I? Oh yeah, the baby went missing. And then it's found. And it turns out to be this girl. But this adds nothing! Also, when Donald and the girl do return with the baby, it is very obvious that in some shots the baby is a dummy. Some people say American Sniper has the worst fake baby, but need I remind you that this film exists? And who else but Mr. Poppy to throw the child up in the air and endanger its life? That's another 3 years on the prison sentence. Okay, now for my favourite scene in the movie. The class climbs up a mountain and expect to see the castle on the other side. But instead, there's a cliff, which leaves them only 3 options. A, they could use a rope to bring everyone down. B, they could turn around and go home. Or C, they could, jump. As much as I wish it was option C, they went with option A, further endangering the children. And even worse, Mr. Poppy has brought Mr. Peterson into his antics. He's unstoppable. No one can stop this man's war crimes anymore, as C-3PO once said.
We're doomed.
But hang on, why is this my favourite scene? Well, it's because of the lack of care Desmond and Donald have for the children. Just look at these scenes where the children are clearly scared and struggling, whilst both teachers fail to cooperate with the rope. Seriously, these guys have the same amount of chemistry as the Gallagher brothers in 2009, which leads to the rope slipping and one of the kids being stuck on the ledge of the cliff with no harness. Although, by the way this was filmed, it just looks like he's at the bottom of the cliff and the director's just told the kid to look as if he's hanging on for dear life. But nevertheless, Poppy and Donald execute the child. They execute a rescue mission to help the child, which they do by just holding on to his hand. Great job, lads. But they have a slight interruption when a helicopter spots them in danger. In the Manger? Thank you. I'm here all week. And you wouldn't believe who's in it. Chev Chelios, who grabs Verona and both fall out of the helicopter. Oh wait, wrong video. In reality, it's Donald's wife, who went out of her way to coordinate a full-on search and rescue operation, whilst on the verge of being pregnant. Any woman out there watching this When men do stuff like paying the bill for you, holding your bags, and driving you places, this is what they expect in return. But what I didn't expect was the kid just getting kidnapped by the helicopter and they just fly off. Side note, I had to compose myself 23 times in order to deliver that line, which is still less than the amount of war crimes Mr. Poppy has committed. But at least he didn't sacrifice Mr. Peterson's life, as Mr. Poppy does hoist him down safely. But we don't know how Mr. Poppy gets down, never gets explained. The next time we see the group, they're just standing outside the castle with Mr. Poppy acting like nothing happened. Unless Mr. Poppy actually did jump. So with Mrs. Bevan and the kids hunting down the class, the national competition starts, and like I said at the start of the video, all the songs range from listenable to irritating, and that could not be more correct here. So let me quickly rank all the songs speedrun style. The Christmas Bun song is harmless, but at the same time it's just there. Lloyd and the Snowballs has horrible auto-tune, and Is This Woman Hanging in the Air good for health and safety? Christmas Tree song just screams Ireland, and when I rewatched this video, I genuinely thought they were doing an Austrian Pater's hand gesture at this part. The Christmas Fairy song is downright awful, and reminds me of how rapping Christmas is a worse idea than giving Mr. Poppy a teaching assistant job. Counting Down to Christmas is fine, even though the song feels like it lasts 30 seconds. That was difficult. And to any of you saying I'm forgetting the other songs by Roderick's Choir and St. Bernadette's, don't worry, I'll get to those. But for now, Donald reunites with his wife and they go into their dressing room to prepare for the song. And whilst they're waiting, the baby needs changing, so Mr. Poppy leaves to do that. And when he's done, he gives the baby back to Mr. Peterson. I mean, I'm not wrong. How on earth have you managed that, you scruffy, delusional war criminal? So with the baby now in the hands of Roderick, because of this imbecile, the other Mr. Peterson, Mr. Poppy and the class go to retrieve it from Roderick's hands, which they do, briefly. But immediately after they get it back, Roderick's Choir just swarms St. Bernadette's like they've got the last roll of toilet paper during the COVID pandemic, and they end up being trapped in this big globe. Also, just look at the way they dive in, like they weren't thrown in there by a bunch of 16-year-olds. Couldn't they have just stopped moving? Because by the looks of things, this looks like strong intimidation, not force. And with that tactic, Roderick keeps hold of the baby, and St. Bernadette's are trapped. Just as Roderick's Choir goes on stage with the baby. What does he do with the baby? Well, they steal Oakmore's solo that the lad did before.
Booted on my PC, cause I need to get that Fortnite Battle Pass.
And of course, Gordon is furious, and there's nothing he can do. Because if he goes on afterwards with his song, everyone will assume he's copying the choir. But the only thing Gordon is copying is Roderick's facial expressions during his performance, which reminds me too much of Tobey Maguire when he's attempting to stop the train in Spider-Man 2. So with Gordon and Oakmore unable to perform and St. Bernadette stuck in a globe and somehow being disqualified, it is never brought up why they're disqualified, they just are. Again, great writing, Debbie. Gordon has a plan, which, no joke, is actually a pretty clever idea. And that is St. Bernadette's performing as Oakmore. So for a brief moment in history, Oakmore and St. Bernadette's sign a peace treaty, and Oakmore agrees to push St. Bernadette's globe on stage so that they can perform. And to be fair, the song they do is tolerable.
My diamonds!
But for some reason, once they're done, they're let out of the globe and are able to perform another song. How does this work? Isn't this a national competition? Shouldn't the supervisors behind this be on a strict time schedule? But anyways, when everyone gets backstage, St. Bernadette's are delighted because they had fun, and Roderick is there with his dad to say that Donald's not going to win. But that doesn't matter to Donald, as he has a baby on the way, has had so much fun, and says that Mr. Poppy has been more of a brother to him than Roderick has ever been. Are you sure about that? Do you want to repeat that? But as Donald is digging into Roderick, just listen to this exchange him and his dad have.
There's no need to be so patronising to your brother. Shut up!
This was such a curveball that I actually ended up laughing so loud that I briefly forgot about the awful things Mr. Poppy did to children. However, when the class starts leaving, Donald's wife starts going into labour. And you're telling me she could drive from Coventry to Wales, coordinate a search and rescue, and somehow sift through a song for Christmas, all in the span of one day? Fair one, mate. So they use the donkey to transport Sarah to a barn not far from the castle, with the children dressed up as Nativity characters. Notice anything familiar? And when they get there, she gives birth to not one child, but two, which causes Donald's dad to appear and suddenly be all nice about becoming a granddad. I'm sorry, the clocks change more frequently than you may. And whilst all this is happening, they announce the winner for A Song for Christmas, which, at this point, I could not care less, and the bias towards Roderick's Choir could not be more clearer. This has got to be more rigged than a North Korean election. Yes, believe it or not, they have them. Here's the voting cards. But surprisingly, the winner isn't Roderick's Choir. Instead, it's Oakmore. And to anyone saying this winner's undisturbed, who would you rather want winning? Flash Gordon or this war criminal? I thought so. Now everything's wrapping up and Donald's looking at his little half-lock with one of his newborn sons, and Roderick walks in to congratulate his brother and to ask to bring the family together more often. That's so wholesome, but not as wholesome as this moment. Without a single word, so much emotion is conveyed, knowing that no matter how bad things got with his brother, Roderick still loved and cared about him. And with some horrible auto-tune singing by Mr. Poppy, which I'm going to count as a last-minute war crime because why not, the movie is over.
Finally, inner peace.
So that was Nativity 2, Danger in the Manger. Even though I think this is ever so slightly worse than the first film, I can't deny, I enjoyed this a lot more entertainment-wise. There are so many moments that are unironically funny, and the emotional moments of the film really hit hard. But at the end of the day, not just this movie, but the whole franchise is simply for kids. And I'm just here to give some people out there some nostalgia for a bit, and locking up violent offenders. So for Nativity 2, Danger in the Manger, I'd give it a 3.5 out of 10. Yes, it's lower than the first, as a film, but entertainment-wise, it's like an 8. And as for Mr. Poppy, I hereby sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Okay, now Mr. Poppy has nowhere to go. He doesn't have a set time where he could possibly get out. For the last time, I have finally got him where I want him. Stop! Wait, who are you? Benji, I'm you from the future. What? So you're also Benji? How's that even possible? It doesn't matter. I have something important to tell you. Okay, just make it quick. I need to celebrate this historic win. Since you're from the future, you remember Mr. Poppy, right? Ooh, you should sit down and take a look at this. Fuck!